So fundamentally, I think Lee is the two things when I think of Lee, I think he's a magician and he's a comedian. And he does some other stuff with energy or psychology or the planets or Jupiter or some other stuff. And a few other things as well. And those of you, again, who know Lee know all about that, so I'm going to get the heck out of here and hand it over to Lee.
Thank you all so much for coming. I'm really honored. Thank you, Jim and Catherine, for the privilege of speaking today, but I'm especially honored that all of you came. Today's talk is on a subject that means a great deal to me. It's about a strategy for actually dealing with the unique nature of heartache. A lot of times the presumption is that gaining insight into heartache, this won't work. And even sometimes doing EMDR or doing brain spotting or somatic experiencing, that all the things that we typically have available as tools will address heartache. And the truth is that the heart has a different perspective on the world, a different relationship to the world than the mind, than the nervous system. I'm going to talk a lot about that today. So I'm very grateful for your being here. As far as myself, I have a body-based practice to help people resolve trauma in Santa Fe. I'm very blessed to have a long waiting list. My waiting list is currently closed until September 20th. What do I do with people? I have a certain level of gift where I can read the body on a really detailed level. Is the trauma lying in the lymphatic system, in the nervous system, in the meridian system, in the chakra system, in the endocrine system, yada, da, 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 da. And what I can do is figure out where that is and work specifically there for that person. So that's the nature of my work. That's why, even though I have a degree in both massage therapy and counseling, I'm not licensed in either, because I don't do either. I do Lee. When people ask me what I do Lee. The best thing of all of my life is my marriage. I've been married 30 years now. Lucky me. So without further ado, let's just go for it. So what is Mending Broken Hearts? It's a simple way of updating your biological heart for all the emotional and spiritual work you've done over the course of your life. But why? Why would you need that? Have you ever noticed that the heart can feel broken long after your mind has gotten over a painful experience? That's not possible. Everything is based on thought. Sorry. But I was certain that everything could be changed with the right affirmations. Sorry. But did you know that when they transplant a heart into the recipient's body, medical science doesn't know yet how to hook up the nervous system to the heart? They just electrically jumpstart the heart with a shock machine, and the heart starts beating over the course of the rest of that person's life with no connection to the nervous system. So, well, what that means is that if the heart beats without any connection to the nervous system, then it beats without any connection to thought. Oh my God! That can't be safe. Did you know that the heart starts beating in utero before the brain is formed? Before the brain is formed, the heart starts beating. I don't believe you. I'm sorry. That's not possible. Did you know that when the brain tells the heart to speed up, sometimes the heart actually speeds up, and sometimes the heart on its own volition slows down? It just decides, well, whatever, I'm slowing down. That's true. Now you got me worried. Did you know that heart transplant recipients often report changes in their physiological state that correlate with the heart donor? In a small University of Hawaii nursing school study, heart transplant recipients showed 2 to 5 shifts in music, food, art, and other preferences that actually align with their donor. Well then, who the heck is in charge? Who's running the show then? The brain or the heart? And the answer is, it depends on the situation. And if you really want to get beyond this course, it also could be the gut. Because the enteric nervous system of the gut also has an independent experience, totally independent from that of the brain. So there could be several things running your show other than your brain, which you think it is. So what is certain then within this confusion? What is certain is that the heart can have a distinctly different experience of your life than your brain. Oftentimes totally independent of what you're thinking. And in fact, the more traumatized a person is, the greater the difference it's likely to be between the heart and the mind reality maps. And in fact, in situations with trauma, it is completely normal for the heart to feel broken long after the mind has gotten over a painful experience. So today's talk, let me just get some water. I want you to leave here being able to do this process. How to get to that? First, I'd like to share with you my perspective as on what a broken heart is, because that's what this process is for healing that. Then I want to talk about the actual theory behind the technique and the technique itself. That's letter B. Then I'm going to do a demonstration of the technique. Then we'll work with each other trying the technique out. So that's where we're going. So the starting point is, what exactly is a broken heart? This is my definition. And to me, a broken heart is where a heart feels overwhelmingly painful events from the past to be an ongoing reality. Well, that sounds kind of technical. To simplify that, it's where the heart is experiencing painful events from the past as if they're still happening right now. So what kind of painful events might qualify for that? Clearly, in relationships, the cruelty that we can do to one another can make you feel like your heart's been shattered. If you're a parent and ever lost a child, it can feel as if your heart is turned to stone. The choices that we make in life can sometimes feel as if it's tearing our heart apart. A heart might feel like it's bleeding from loneliness. The substances that we abuse can break our heart. Just to share a couple perspectives on this, clearly the most profound challenge that someone's faced within substance abuse is stopping. And the presumption would always be that as soon as someone stops, then their body is over the drug. And I just cannot tell you how untrue that is. What you can find oftentimes is someone's heart actually resonating at the frequency of the cocaine, of the meth, 10, 15, 20 years later. Which is why it's so hard sometimes for someone to stay away from the drug, because their heart is still beating at that frequency. That's a broken heart from substance. Now, does that always happen? No, but when someone, I'd say half the people that have come into my office that are struggling with staying, coherent with not going back, it's because their heart is still at the frequency of meth. It's an amazing thing to release that. Clearly, a heart can break from the pain and suffering from the world. This is the Heart and Mind cartoon. The heart says, or the brain says, "What happened?" And the heart says, "I watched the news." If you've ever known someone that lost a loved one to a long, protracted illness, or perhaps is losing them ongoingly to Alzheimer's, that can feel as if you're actually losing your heart. Sometimes it's not just one event, it's a series of events that can make you feel like you don't even want to have your heart anymore. Sometimes heart pain can be so strong it actually feels like it's hijacking your brain. Now let's be real clear. I'm not talking about a heart attack. If you have a heart attack, don't try this technique. Call 911, please. But then focusing on heartache, is there any good news in all of this? And the good news is that mending broken heart experience is possible. All the examples I'm going to give today are composites from my practice. I'm not talking about any specific client. Please be aware of that. Example number 1. Woman age 28 comes in and has had a heavy depressive feeling in her heart ever since at age 4 when her mother died tragically in a car accident. So just a depressive pall over her heart for 24 years. After 2 sessions of doing the process, the depressive feeling lastingly, permanently clears. Man, age 39, comes in, and his heart has felt broken ever since at age 13 that his father viciously began a process of humiliating him in front of his peers. After just 1 session, that lifted off. Woman age 61 comes in and has had what she described as a seam of anxiety piercing through her heart ever since she can remember. And why does she have it? Because she was born with the twilight birthing process. Some of you might not know what that is. The twilight birthing process was a process of birth that was popular in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and early 70s, where to save women from the pain of childbirth, they didn't give them a spinal, they gave them total anesthesia. So that women were giving birth to children under complete anesthetic. I wonder what that meant for the child. It meant that the child was born under total anesthesia. It meant the child was basically born turned off. Had devastating consequences for people. After just 2 sessions of the process, the seam of anxiety lifted. So this is it's an amazing process. Does it work every time? No, but it works all the time. It's a really cool process. That's what I want to share with you today, is this kind of process. The goal in each of these situations in working with people is to bring the heart into present time. Now, why would that be the goal? Remember, if heart trauma or broken heart experiences where the heart's feeling like something from the past is still happening, then the goal of the process needs to be the opposite. The goal is simply to get the heart into present time. This process is not about catharsis. It's not about the idea, you need to get in touch with your sadness. Not really. But you might. A lot of times people, when they're doing the process, might feel a lot of emotion start to move through their body. But that movement is not the goal. The goal is to be more alive. The goal is to feel safe. The goal is for your heart to feel alive. Amazingly, mending broken heart actually can upgrade the heart. It can make your heart bigger, filled with more compassion, and even stronger. And you might even make friends of your brain and your heart. So with that in mind, what is a broken heart? Again, my definition, I'm asking just to borrow for this afternoon, and you can let it go if you don't like it. It's where the heart feels that a painful event from the past is still happening right now. Your heart feels that. And that's what causes the ongoing cyclical feelings of heartache. So what is the strategy then for changing this? And it's actually pretty cool. A lot of it's based on research that came out of the HeartMath Institute, but the technique has nothing to do with HeartMath, which is, again, HeartMath is great, but a lot of the research I'm going to dive into right now is straight out of HeartMath. So from HeartMath, the heart produces by far the largest electromagnetic field in the body, without exception. Here's an artist's rendition of that field. Important to observe in this is that the field permeates every cell of the body and extends several feet out away from the body and returns back. This is pivotal. This is not some force field that you're pushing out. The field goes away from the body and then comes back. It's part of that metaphor of what you put out comes back to you. This isn't just an energy drawing. This is, in fact, the quality of a magnetic field. And the heart's field is electromagnetic. It has a magnetic component, so the field goes out and comes back. So again, please don't think of your heart field as like going, I want to have a heart field so I can feel safe. Yeah, you do want a heart field so you can feel safe, but it's something that allows energy to come in and out. It's not this barrier. Now, interestingly enough, the field that the heart produces, as far as amplitude, the electrical component of it is 60 times stronger than that produced by the brain. 60 times. And the magnetic component of the heart's field is 100 times stronger than that produced by the brain. It's pretty amazing. The magnetic component can actually be scientifically measured with a magnetometer, and sometimes can be measured to be up to 8 to 10 feet away from the body. Meaning that if her heart field is really strong, someone actually might start to walk into it about here. So what does all of this have to do with mending a broken heart? When a heart breaks, the field diminishes. Period. When a heart breaks, that field that we just talked about, that field diminishes. And what does that mean? What do I mean by diminish? It means it gets smaller. What does smaller mean? It means sometimes when I'm working with someone and their heart is really, really deeply broken, if it's her, then literally I might be standing right here and just barely be in her heart field. What's the problem with that? The problem is that it means that her sense of safety in the world is this limited. If someone has a heart field that comes out to here, there's all these different ranges of possibilities in their life where they can feel safe. Whereas if it's just right up next to their chest, it's like they're just waiting for someone to come in and invade them there. Any kind of input can be perceived as an invasion. As well, the field starts to get porous. Now, the classic example of that is if I was walking around her just checking out her heart field, then what you often find when there's trauma that's made the field diminished is not only is it smaller, but there's huge gaps in it. So I'm walking around her field, and there's a gap here, then I'm back into it, then there's a gap here, and then you go, well, what's the big deal? The big deal is that if there's a gap, for example, right here, this part of her field is incredibly porous to other people's crap. So if I were to stand next to her and be really angry at her, and if I happen to be psychically unpleasant enough to actually align myself with this part of her field, then she could be twice as thrown by me screaming at her if I was here versus here if her field existed here. Does that make sense? There's actually angles that can just be totally obliterated, which can create, again, incredible vulnerability. What also diminish means is that there can be a lot of disassociation. So if someone had a major concussion and it affected their right hemisphere, then what you might find is the field's generating, and it goes up to the left hemisphere and comes back to the heart, goes up to the hypothalamus and comes back. And it kind of, well, we'll just skip that. It totally skips parts of the body. So if a woman was raped, you might find that the heart field might go down to her legs, go down to the hip, and entirely bypass her reproductive system because that's just not safe anymore. So disassociation, not because she's dumb, that's just the heart doesn't feel safe sexually anymore. And what is that a setup for? It's a setup for every time later on in her life, if she wants to have sex with someone that she really cares about, there's no level where she can make an association of this current time event of having sex with someone she loves without having it tied into the fact that there was a violation, because the violation is still sitting in her heart field. Does that make sense? Yes. Which is incredibly unfortunate. Finally, the field can get much more fragile. So there's a really bad rap that the sympathetic nervous system has in a lot of alternative communities. It's just like, you're just sympathetically aroused. The truth is that the sympathetic nervous system is the basis for fight or flight. And guess what else it is? It's the basis for being happy. It's the basis for being excited. So when you're excited, your sympathetic nervous system takes over. In the same sense, your heart needs to be able to ramp up, ramp down, to go through. It's like to be peaceful, to have really nice calm frequency, to be able to ramp up and to have a really elevated ecstatic kind of experience. And when there's a lot of heart trauma, the field is very fragile and only can go through this much range of emotional experience versus this. And when you're limited to this, it's much harder to feel joy. So when I'm saying that the field gets diminished, this is what it means to me. Smaller, more porous, disassociated, and or fragile. So again, the heart field is supposed to permeate every part of the body and ideally extend several feet off the body, so we have several feet in front of us and around us in every single direction in which we feel safe. And that can break down in heartbreak. What's the best way of healing? Simply reboot the field. Reestablish the heart's generation of electromagnetic field. Bring the field to optimum size, shape, association, and flexibility. That's the goal. This automatically brings the heart into present time. If you get the heart to reboot out to normal size for this person, that automatically means they're going to be more in present time. It's automatic. You take the heart field from, instead of just being out to here, and then they can walk out of the office and have the heart field out to there all the time. That means that they're more in present time everywhere they are. But how could you ever do that? How can I get my heart to do something different? And the truth is, you just talk to your heart. You actually use your brain to focus your heart on the electromagnetic field that it's generating. And again, in other words, talk to your heart. But then obviously the question is, what the heck would I say? And that's what this class is about, so don't worry about it. So to be able to learn how to talk to your heart, just who is the heart? What is it? What is the heart? The heart is a muscular organ that pumps blood through the vessels of the cardiovascular system. In the adult, it's about the size of a fist. As far as its location, looking straight on to me, my heart is right about here. And if you want to know where it is looking down at your own heart, it is just behind the breastbone. So there's your sternum, and there's the heart. So it's not way in the back, it's here and just inside the rib cage. That's the location. As far as what the heart is magic. The heart beats on average 100,000 times a day, and about 5 billion times over the course of an average lifetime. 5 billion times. The vessels of the cardiovascular system, the arteries and veins, capillaries in between, stretches out over 60,000 miles in length for an average adult. That means that's 2 times the circumference of the earth is the size of the artery and capillary and venous system in your body. That's a miracle. Here's another metaphor. You'd have to take your kitchen faucet, put it on full throttle for 45 years to equal the amount of blood you pump through your heart in an average lifetime. So the heart is magic. But getting back to the electromagnetic field, again, notice, I just want to emphasize, This is not some field that just goes out. It goes out and comes back and permeates every cell of the body. There are a total of 10 parts of the heart in this process that we're going to use, that we're going to talk to about reestablishing the generation of the heart's electromagnetic field. Just my saying that probably goes, oh God, this will never work. I can't remember any of this shit. You don't need to remember any of these parts. You don't need to know their function. I mean it. All you need to do is read their name from a sheet of paper. How the hell is that going to work? Just listen to this. Each of the parts of the heart knows their name when you say it. Your pericardium knows it's the pericardium. If you say the word pericardium off a sheet of paper, the pericardium goes, oh, you're talking to me? It knows who it is. And it knows your voice when you speak to it. Period. So I'm going to talk about these parts of the heart just to give you a flavoring, but you don't need to remember any of it. It's not the basis for the process. And that's important to tell clients if you use this technique with anybody. You don't need to remember any of this, know anything. People oftentimes go, and what does that part do? And I go, if you want to know, I'll tell you, but it really doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. Now, if you're a body worker and your client's heart feels safe, if you have your hand on the back of their chest and you're talking to their heart will respond to your thoughts through your hands just as if it was you talking to your own heart. Here's the sentence we're going to say to each part of the heart. There's 2 blanks. Blank, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after. So, for example, heart muscle cells, which is one of the 10 parts of the heart muscle cells. Please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my divorce. If you're a body worker, the sentence is simpler. Heart muscle cells, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field that you are generating. Now, in this prior sentence, why does it say we? If someone's doing this process on themselves, either alone or with the facilitation of a practitioner, the we means, if I was doing the process, it'd be me and my heart. But obviously, if you're doing it as a body worker, you're asking the client's heart, talk about the field that you're generating. And this is really amazing. If you have a child before puberty, then you could actually work on their heartache for them as a point of grace while they're sleeping. Then you go, well, that's pushy. No, notice the sentence. Do you check the sentence out? Heart, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field you're generating. And if the heart actually doesn't want to, then guess what? It won't. Well, how could this work? The child's asleep. How could that work? Because they're not participating at all. What has that got to do with anything? I can't tell you the number of children I've worked in my office on their heart. They have no idea what I'm doing. They're lying on the table asleep. The parents sitting at the table next to me, so the child feels safe, and I'm just talking to their heart. It works as if I was doing it out loud. It works as if they're doing it out loud. No one knows what's going on, and it works anyway. This is the nature of the heart. But why they have, I don't care, whatever process you're talking about, why they have the heart talk to the sun? What is this, some kind of sun worship? Jesus. I thought that ended with Egypt. No. Who knows more about generating electromagnetic fields than anybody? The sun. But you go, no, I should have this, I should have my heart talk to Christ. Or have my heart talk to Buddha, or have my heart talk to Muhammad. Yeah. The sun. It's non-denominational. And it's freaking huge. Do you know how big the heart's field is? It goes beyond the edges of the solar system. It's that magnificent. It's called the heliosphere. And how long does it do that? Oh, for billions of years. Billions of years. And our bodies, our whole bodies, our hearts, are always in direct relationship with the sun, whether it's up or down, for our very survival. If the sun goes away, we're all dead instantly. We're all dead. That's it. We'd all freeze to death. So this is not about sun worship. Example, pericardium. Please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after the accident. You don't need to think that your heart can talk to the sun. For most people, it's like, yeah, right, my heart's going to talk to the sun. How's that going to happen? There's no phone line. Just say the sentence, it'll work anyway. You don't have to believe it's going to work. It just does. Because your heart knows the sun. Here's the 10 parts of the heart. You must memorize them. No! Now, these are listed in the handouts on pages 13 and 14. To help you feel comfortable with these 10 parts of the heart, let me briefly introduce them to you. These descriptions are in the handouts on pages 13 and 14. The handouts are really good. Okay, here are the 10 parts of the heart. To a certain extent, I'm moving from the outside of the heart in. Why? Just because it's logical. The pericardium is the outer lining of the heart that encloses and protects it. It has 3 tissue layers and 1 fluid layer. Now there's a level where if you're, even especially if perhaps if you're a body work, you might go, it can't be the pericardium, that can't be the most important, it has to be the electrical system of the heart, that's the most important. The pericardium is the outer layer that can be broken open, where someone can feel violated through. So it might be the outer layers that are the most important. It varies by person. There is no more important one. They're all important. That's a really great picture. On the right is a pig heart. On the left is the collagen framework or layer of tissue called, collagen fibers that protect the heart. It's like a protein, and collagen is protein, it's like the protein hull of the heart. So again, this was originally had this inside of it. And that's what the collagen framework looks like with the heart removed. This protein hull helps the heart understand to maintain its form and shape. So again, you just go, oh, this can't be important. Yeah, it is. The average adult heart is estimated to have more than 2 billion heart muscle cells. That's incredible. The heart muscle cells exist in the outer layer of the heart. So there's the pericardium, then there's the collagen framework, and then here's the myocardium, or the muscle layer of the heart. Over 2 billion heart muscle cells. Obviously, I'm being very simplistic in these introductions. Really important, again, this one I conceptually I always like this one the best because it makes so much sense as far as heartbreak, but it's not the most important, are what are called intercalated discs. An intercalated disc, here's a heart muscle cell, and these intercalated discs connect the heart muscle cells end to end. It's what holds heart muscle cells together. But not only does it hold together, each of these intercalated discs has thousands of interconnecting channels that allows one heart muscle cell to communicate incredibly elegantly with the next one. And it's this factor that allows for the rhythmic contraction and waves of contraction and relaxation through the heart chambers in the heart beating process. Thousands of channels in each one of these. It's pretty amazing. The heart conduction system is, in fact, the electrical wiring of the heart. It's not nerves, though. It's actually just specialized heart muscle tissue. This is just a diagram from a classic, kind of anatomy textbook of the heart conduction system. What the system does is it propagates from the sinoatrial node down to the AV node and then throughout the ventricles, etc. It propagates the instructions for heart muscle contraction and relaxation as your heart beats. So the heart conduction system is the heart's electrical wiring. The endocardium is the inner lining of the heart. It's the layer of the heart that's directly in contact with the blood as it flows through. The heart has four valves. These valves open to allow blood to flow through and close to prevent blood from flowing backwards. This is a picture on the right of the mitral valve, and here it is beating. And it's the closing of the valves that creates the heart sounds that are listened to with a stethoscope. The heart also has its own sensory system. The pericardium, or you remember the outer layer of the heart, the outermost layer, actually has pain receptors, and I feel like this is likely a place where a lot of heart pain, not again from heart attack, but heart pain from heartbreak, is actually perceived by the body. There's several different kinds of pain receptors. And the muscular wall of the heart also has different kinds of pressure receptors, and I've saw some articles saying that they have oxygen receptors. I don't know, there's not real clear data on it, but there's also receptors in the muscular layer of the heart. In 1983, the heart went from being just a part of the cardiovascular system to actually being known to be part of the endocrine system as well. The upper chambers of the heart were realized in 1983 to emit an endocrine hormone, ANP, atrial natriuretic peptide, and this led to the reclassification of the heart as an endocrine gland. 7 years later, it was realized that the ventricles, or lower chambers of the heart, also emit their own hormone, brain natriuretic peptide. Finally, this is not based at all on anything you'll find anywhere. The person that most inspired the work that I put together, his name is William E. Gray. He died in the 1970s. He was a profound healer. I don't even qualify to be his janitor. And he felt like a major role of the heart was to electrically charge the blood. So I'm just going to call that blood charging system, and that's the 10th thing on the list. He felt like the electrical charge of the blood is what allows it to perform its many functions throughout the body. So here we are back again at the sentence. Blood charging system, the last one we just talked about. Please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after. So what the heck goes at the end of the sentence then? Just keeping on staying with setting up the process. What goes at the end first is a fact-based description of the event without emotion. After the car accident, after the surgery, after my husband beat me. Very fact-based, not after my terrible father. It's like, after my father beat me. This is a key quality of this process. The event that you're working with this frame, the event that you're working with needs to be over. So after the car accident, after my father died, after my son died, after I stopped using cocaine, after I was raped, after whatever, the event needs to be over. There are ways of adjusting the process to where the trauma is ongoing. You get the difference. If your husband has just developed dementia, yeah, that's an event, but then there's the ongoing reality of the dementia. So you can't really put after dementia if your husband's still alive. Does that make sense? To just say it out loud, what you do, this is not described in the handouts, but I just want to mention it. So I'm going to click back, sorry. If you want to know how to use this in that frame, it would say, we are generating in relation to my husband's dementia. So again, I'm just repeating. Blood charging system, please ask the son about the electromagnetic field we are generating in relation to my husband's dementia for an ongoing trauma per se. In relation to my wife's anger. In relation to my wife's cheating, if that's ongoing. There shouldn't be any evaluations in this description. Evil father, just father. Because this is not about repeating a sentence that's going to make you more and more angry. The goal is actually resolution of heartache, not fueling up hatred. Sometimes you'll be working with yourself or a client where there's an event that happened over and over and over again. So it's like some of you might have had the privilege of working with someone whose brother or sister just beat them up for years. And it's not like you have to do this process for each time that the brother hits you or the sister hits you. You just say, after each time my brother hit me, after each time my sister hit me. Now, this is very important. Sometimes I've worked with several women with this process who were raped, and for many women to actually say, after I was raped, actually feels validating to them. It's like, I was raped. After that, what was my heart filled after that happened? It's very validating. And there are some women who totally understandably to say that over and over again is shattering. Just saying it once is just like, I don't want to go there. That's not because they're resistant. It's because that's the way that it is. It's shattering for them to say that even once. So what you can do is just pick the year that it happened and say after 1996. Does that make sense? So if naming the event is too painful, just state the year that it happened. Now, you need to be aware that this process is useful when the person doesn't want to have heartache anymore. Many people, after a loved one has died, require a certain period of grieving based on their religion, based on their biology, based on their genetics, based on their everything, their culture. And some people, they don't have any grieving period. It's like for me, when my father died, this is a true story, the night that my father died, he had an illness called myelodysplasia where he gradually started to bleed a lot. It wasn't classic bleeding disorder. He had a bad reaction to chemotherapy that he had years before. And that night after he died, it was around 2 o'clock in the morning, I had a dream that he was ecstatically happy. Just ecstatic, because he now had a thriving physical form again. And at that very same moment, my sister in Alaska had the exact same dream. We were both ecstatic when he was able to die. I didn't. It was like. So if I'd had any level of heartache, I could have done this process right away. And at the same time, you might have someone in your office who's, let's say that they have a beloved cat, that just died. And they're really torn up by grieving. You go, let's try this process. And if you really check it out, it's not available at all. When is this process available? When the person is tired of the grieving. When the person is just like going, I've grieved and now it just won't stop. I want to be free of this. That's when the process becomes interesting. Does that make sense? When the person feels like they need to grieve, when the person feels like if they were to actually free themselves of the grieving, they would be being unfair to the person who passed over. It's not even interesting to try. But as soon as the person feels like it's not helpful anymore, it's not meant to be, then this process becomes interesting. So, blood charging system. Please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my father died. Heart sensory system. Please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after giving birth to my daughter. Now, just that, several of you are like going, well, that's impossible. This is always a blessed event. Yeah, it is a blessed event. And what happens if the woman almost died? One of the most unrecognized trauma in this country, in my experience, is the birth trauma for the mother. Am I saying it's always that way? No, a lot of times there's no trauma at all. I'm not saying it's always traumatizing. But a woman might have almost died. She might have had a bad reaction to the Pitocin that was used. And her field might be resonating at the frequency of Pitocin for 15 years. So please don't ignore the fact that birth can be traumatizing for the mother too, even if they totally love their child. It's got nothing to do with it. Heart conduction system after 2002. These are not affirmations. You're not standing there telling your heart, now you do this, you stupid cardiovascular pump. I'm in charge here. I'm going to tell you what to do. Your heart, if you do that, will probably go like this. Stick it. These are requests. They really are the request. It's about establishing a relationship between your brain and your heart. It's not an affirmation. It's about a dialogue. It's about relationship. Valves of the heart. Please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after I stopped using cocaine. Just say the sentence 6 to 8 times for each part of the heart, then go on to the next. And there is no right order to do the parts of the heart in. There is no right order. If one of the parts of the heart feels particularly important, then have the client just keep repeating it forever. How would you know that? The client's going through the parts of the heart, pericardium, then collagen framework, and then they start saying heart muscle cells, and they start just crying. Bingo. What does that mean? It means the trauma is really in the heart muscle cells. You just found it. Don't rush on to the next part. Just let's hang out with that for a while. When the person starts to get choked up, going through the parts, that's where the trauma is. When the person gets to a part of the heart and they keep on misstating the word, it's like you tell them intercalated disc and they say it, okay, intercalated disc, and they start doing it and they go, intercalated. That's because that's where the trauma is. It's not a coincidence. They have a hard time talking to it because that's exactly where the trauma is in the intercalated disc of their heart. So how do you set up this process if you're working with a client that's never been at this talk? What do? You tell them. The heart generates a scientifically measurable electromagnetic field. The field permeates every single cell of your body and extends out and returns back to your heart in every direction. What does this extend out and return back? Because this, again, is so important. This is a diagram of the Earth's magnetic field. The Earth's magnetic field emerges from the southern hemisphere, and guess where it goes? Oh my gosh! It comes back right to the center of the Earth that created it. It's a circle. It's a field. It's not a barrier. Trauma can limit the size, shape, and vitality of the field. The goal of the process is simply to update your heart to the truth of who you are now if you're doing the process and an emotion comes up, the goal is to almost be Buddhist. Allow the emotion and stay with the process. The goal is not to go, let's make space for this emotion. Let's just. And then they leave your office and they're where? Right in this. That's really cool. Sobbing their way home. Oh, that's great. It was a great result. No. The goal is to have your heart reboot. The goal is not to not be emotional, but the goal is not to be emotional. If an emotion happens, that's cool. If it doesn't happen, that's cool. The goal is resolution. It's not important to understand the parts of the heart when you're doing this. If you need a break, take it at any time. Feel free to initiate it at any time. What might you feel when you're doing the process? You might feel immediate relief in your heart. You might feel a lot of release signs. What are release signs? Temperature fluctuations, tingling, sweating, aching, crying. All normal parts of the process. You might find it hard to say a word. You might stumble on the word over and over and over again. I might say pericardium, and the person goes, Pugo. That's just the trauma speaking. It's not bad. Now, there's 3 unique situations that I encourage you to make adjustments to the process on. You don't have to, but I encourage you to. One is if you're working with a client that has a strong tendency towards headaches. I'm not saying that they get a headache once a year. I'm saying they suffer from headaches nearly all the time. Or if they get a headache during the process. This process cannot create trauma in your head, but it might reveal it. Because the fact of the matter is that when there's a pattern towards headaches, the electromagnetic field that the heart generates up to the brain can oftentimes be very disassociated. There are 3 circulatory systems of the brain, 3 of them, not just one, 3 of them that can become disassociated from the heart's field. And remember, the heart's field is supposed to permeate every cell of the body. It can disconnect from the arteries and veins. The lymph, what's that? I'll tell you, the lymph, what? The arteries and veins is pretty obvious. Those are the blood coming up from the heart to the brain to feed it, and the venous blood flow returning back to remove carbon dioxide. But what is glymph? Glymph was actually discovered just a few years ago, in 2012. Let me show you something. Let's use this. This is fascinating. Let's say that this is an artery taking blood into the brain. An artery taking blood into the brain. And what a glymph vessel is, it's a chamber that encircles the artery and carries cerebrospinal fluid into the brain. Because remember, the artery is carrying blood in. And here's this glymph channel that is around it that carries cerebrospinal fluid in. And if this was a vein leaving the brain, then there's a glymph channel taking the cerebrospinal fluid out. And you go, why did we only discover that in 2012? Guess what happens as soon as you die? It collapses. What? Anatomically, ever since we've been doing autopsies on the human brain, this layer of tissue that was a glymph channel has been thought for years to be what? Part of the arteries and veins. Because as soon as you die, it just collapses into the vessel itself, the blood vessel. It's only been since 2012 we've been able to do live imaging of the brain. They can actually see this kind of like beautiful fluctuating vessel. This is an artist rendition of that. Just discovered 4 years ago. And this other one I have no explanation for. It's totally logical why this wasn't known. Just last year they realized that the brain has lymph. And if you looked at textbooks for the last 100 years, they always said, the circulatory system, the whole body always has lymph, but not the central nervous system. Textbook after textbook, 1950, 60, 70, 80. The central nervous system has no lymph. Oh, I'm sorry, we were wrong, it does. Last year, just last year. This carries cerebrospinal fluid also out of the brain. So what could cause these kind of disconnects? What could cause these circulatory systems to be offline from the heart's magnetic field? Concussions. birth trauma, whiplash, and oftentimes infections that are chronic, such as Lyme's disease might take it offline, or someone having in the childhood a bad case of meningitis could take those fields offline, and could lead to what? Lots of headaches. In those situations, my suggestion is that you work with that disconnect. Just assume it's there and go, pericardium, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we are generating to and from the arteries of the vein. Say that 6 to 8 times, then go on to the next thing, collagen framework. Why? To try to set up so the person doesn't get headaches. Then once you've done that, then you could go back and try the basic strategy. Now, if you don't want to do that, that's fine. But if you have a strong tendency to headaches, I would encourage you to do this. Second exception, this also is a common disconnect in the heart's electromagnetic field. The person can get queasy during the process or can be queasy a lot during their life. The most common disconnects that lead to this, if there's no medical explanation. Again, if you're nauseous all the time, you should definitely see a doctor. But if there's no medical explanation, then the inferior vena cava and circulation of the digestive tract are often left out. What the heck is that? This is the vein from the lower half of the body that brings the blood from the lower half of the body back up to the heart. This often gets cut off when the person's queasy. Just does. So for body workers and you're working on clients and they get nauseous, don't go, they're resisting. They're not resisting. This is disconnected. 80% of the time, if someone's doing body work and if they reconnect this back up to the heart, the nausea goes like that. It's that. It's not resisting. Sorry. I'm a little bit offended. Okay. Then here's the portal circulation. This is the circulation of the digestive tract and spleen. It's first directed to the liver and then goes back to the inferior vena cava up to the heart. This can often be disconnected from the heart's magnetic field when someone's queasy. What could cause this? Parasites. Terrible cases of food poisoning. After anesthesia. Now, am I saying this always happens? Of course not. Lots of people have had really bad parasites and don't have any kind of queasiness at all. But what I'm saying is if someone has chronic queasiness, these are frequent causes. If someone just had surgery, this is a really frequent cause for why they have queasiness after the surgery, because those blood vessels got disconnected from the heart's magnetic field. How often does that happen? If someone just had surgery, how often do I have to reconnect up the inferior vena cava to the heart? Probably 60, 70% of the time. But is that everybody? No, the only people that come to me are the ones that are traumatized, so it doesn't happen all the time at all. Am I saying that surgery's bad? No, surgery's life-saving. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for surgery. And surgery is oftentimes a trauma. Okay. What you do is you do pericardium, collagen framework for each of these circulatory things, and then you can go on to the basic process. Are there questions on that? You don't have to do that, but if you get queasy during the process, this would be a reason why you'd want to go and try this process of connecting up the inferior vena cava and portal circulation. Does anybody have a question on this? Okay, so her question was, if you work, for example, with this, do you need some time to let that settle in before going to this? No. If you have enough time in a session, go for it. Other questions? The third unique situation I'm just going to briefly discuss is if a person has a lot of recovered memories. I recommend very, 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 very highly that you not go through this statement process for each of their recovered memories. I recommend instead that you group them all together and you do this. It's typed out in the handouts. Pericardium, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generate in relation to my recovered memories. Now, why do I say this? Recovered memories are sometimes true and sometimes not. Sometimes there might be a fundamental essence of it that's true, but the actual mental description is not accurate. These are all possible. Please at least accept this. So let's say that someone has a kind of like there's something really accurate about the memory, but their story around it's wrong. if you have the brain tell the heart to generate a field for an event that never happened, what will that do? It'll set up more disconnect. Am I making sense? That will just make more disassociation to generate a field about something that never happened. So I'm not saying this process can be extremely helpful with recovered memories, but focus on the whole context of recovered memories versus going through them one by one, because any one of those memories that isn't accurate that you're going through can create more distortion in the field than helpful. Okay, we're almost to the point where we're going to take a break. So if you're like going, when are we going to take a break? We're almost there. So if you're going to do the process, what are your jobs? 1, be present. Be present. If the person starts crying, be present. Be as neutral as possible. Not cold, just be present. Help the client switch between the parts of the heart. Once they've said pericardium 6 to 8 times, there is no exact number. Just tell them, okay, let's do collagen framework next. That's all. Help the client stay with the process versus diving into the emotion. So that sometimes the person will start to dive into an emotion during the process. And my encouragement to you is to go, this is a very painful thing that you went through. Please stay with the process, because the goal today is to help you feel free. However you want to dialogue it. And if you feel like it's just essential that the person sit with their crying, that's totally cool too. You have to trust yourself. But again, the goal is not to always stop the process when emotions come online. The goal is actually to work through it. To not deny the emotion, but to not emphasize it, to not view that as sacred. The person's sacred, not the emotion. Oftentimes when the person's doing this process, they'll remember other events. If you're the therapist, jot them down so they don't have to remember them themselves, that you just have a note for themselves, yourself, as something you might want to work on in the future. This process is done when the person can think about the event and there's no heart charge. That's when it's done. You might start off with an event that had, on a scale of 1 to 10, a 10 charge, very high emotional distress around it, and they might get it down to about like a 3 after just a few rounds of doing the process. There's a part of someone that's obsessive compulsive like me that would go, oh, we got to get it down to 1. It's just like, whatever. There might be some other event that's so much more important. It's causing the last few levels of charge on that event you're working with it. So it's not like you always have to get down to the end. But the real goal of this process is that the person be able to think of the event and they have literally no charge at all. That's the goal. Finally, it's really important. This does follow Peter Levine's kind of laws of how to work with trauma. If someone goes into a reenactment, which would be incredibly rare in a process where the person's reading something from a sheet of paper. I've never had it in my practice around this process. But if it ever did happen where the person goes into a reenactment, what would that mean? It means they lose sense of connection to you and they feel like their father's hitting them right now. They totally disconnect from present time reality and they're back in the event. If that happens, you are now a lifeguard, period. This is classic Peter Levine, Besser, van der Kolk approach. You are now a lifeguard. Get them back into the present. What do? Rita, look in my eyes. Tell me what color my eyes are. Rita, look at my eyes. Rita, look at the clock. Tell me what time it is right now. Tell me what time it is right now, Rita. Tell me what color pants you're wearing right now. Whatever. Tell me the names of your children. Do not ask them what they're feeling. Do not ask them what they're feeling. That's the problem, what they're feeling. Focus them on current sensory, external reality. All right. Finally, it's helpful because this process is so heart-based to do a little bit of neurological movement afterwards to help your nervous system catch up to your heart. Patrick, could you, everyone stand up. Now I realize there's hardly any room to do this. Now, some of you are EMDR practitioners. What could you do instead of this? Have the client sit in the chair with the pulsers and hold on to them. I'm not going to try to translate for anybody that does do EMDR. It's a common use strategy. This would be the same, having the person just sit there with the pulsers, not tune into anything, just sit there with the pulsers to try to connect the left and right sides of the brain. I don't have any translation for this one. This is trying to get the brain in this dimension. Can you do the process on yourself? Of course you can, if you can stay present and not get flooded. Now, for some of you that meditate a lot, that means that this process is as easy as pie. And for other people where it's just like I sit with my emotions and I always get flooded, it might mean you need to get help with this a few times before you do it on your own. But it is totally possible to do this on your own. I must suggest, though, at the same time, if you try it, that you don't do it for 2 minutes before your husband comes home. Because if you start to do this process for 2 minutes before your husband comes home and just start to deal with this major heart trauma, it's going to be just beginning to open up, and then he walks in. That's called sucks. You're going to blast him out of all your anger from that old trauma. Man would do that to a wife. I'm not setting up the other way. If I had this horrible thing my mother did to me, and I worked on it for 1 minute, then Ursula walked home, it would be a nightmare evening. Because I'd project my mother all over her. Does this make sense? So allow time. Never while driving. I love it when clients go, can I do it while I'm driving? Oh, yeah. While you're texting, too. Okay. Thank you very much. So, Gloria brought up a couple situations that were very painful, and you chose which one to work with?
The death of my son.
And how long ago did this happen?
Last October.
And how did he die?
He died from complications of alcoholism.
Okay, so if that doesn't make you want to... So, on a scale of 1 to 10, Gloria, how much pain is there in that when you even speak about it, from 1 to 10?
8.
It's about an 8. Okay. So, when we're going to do the process together, I'm going to jump a little bit around from the parts of the heart, because that's just how I do it in the office. It's not why this works, it's just how I do it. So let's just start with heart conduction system. And the statement would read, heart conduction system, please ask the son about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died. Okay?
I see it.
Yes.
Okay. Heart conduction system, please ask the son about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died.
Just great. Just keep repeating that.
Heart conduction system, please ask the son about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died.
Doing great.
Heart conduction system, please ask the son about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died. Heart condition system, please ask the son about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died. Heart conduction system, please ask the son about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died.
Doing great. Just keep going.
Okay, heart conduction system, please ask the son about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died.
Go to the next one on the list, endocardium.
Endocardium, please ask the son about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died. Endocardium, please ask the son about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died.
You're doing great.
Endocardium, please ask the son about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died.
Okay, so I'm going to, at that moment, if you're a body worker or really track people, her heart just hurt her. Just then, her heart went, oh. Before she was saying the sentence, and it was starting to work, but the working process is that her heart just went, oh, she's talking to me. That just happened. Go ahead, sorry.
Okay, do I do the same one?
Yes, you're doing
Okay.
great.
Endocardium, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died.
Doing great.
Endocardium, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died. Endocardium, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died. Endocardium, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died. Endocardium, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died.
Go on to the next one, which is valves of the heart.
Valves of the heart, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died. Valves of the heart, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died. Valves of the heart, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died. Valves of the heart, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died. Valves of the heart, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died. Valves of the heart, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died.
Just keep doing that. You're doing great.
Valves of the heart, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died. Valves of the heart, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died. Valves of the heart, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died.
Doing great.
Valves of the heart, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died. Valves of the heart, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died.
Go on to the next one, heart endocrine system.
Heart endocrine system, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died. Heart endocrine system, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died. Heart endocrine system, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died. Heart endocrine system, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died.
Good job. Keep going.
Heart endocrine system, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died. Heart endocrine system, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died. Heart endocrine system, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died.
Great job. Next one.
Heart sensory system, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died. Heart sensory system, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died. Heart sensory system, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died.
Doing great.
Heart sensory system, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died. Heart sensory system, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died. Heart sensory system, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died. Heart sensory system, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died.
Okay, go on to the next one.
Blood charging system, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died. Blood charging system, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died. Blood charging system, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died. Blood charging system, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died. Blood charging system, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died.
Okay, why don't you take a break? How you doing?
Good, good.
Good.
Yeah,
You want to just keep going, or you want to pause for a moment?
I could keep going, I think.
Okay,
Right. next
just go to the top.
Pericardium, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died. Pericardium, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died. Pericardium, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died. Pericardium, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died. Pericardium, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died. Pericardium, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died.
Great, next one.
Collagen framework, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died. Collagen framework, please ask ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died. Collagen framework, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died. Collagen framework, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died.
You're doing great. Keep going.
Collagen framework, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died.
Great job. Heart muscle cells.
Heart muscle cells, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died. Heart muscle cells, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died. Heart muscle cells, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died. Heart muscle cells, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died.
Intercalated disc.
Intercalated disc, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died. Intercalated disc, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died. Intercalated discs, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died. Intercalated discs, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died. Intercalated discs, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died. Intercalated discs, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died.
You're doing great. Just keep going.
Intercalated discs, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died. Intercalated discs, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died. Intercalated discs, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died. Intercalated discs, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died. Intercalated discs, please ask the sun about the electromagnetic field we generated after my son died.
Okay. How are you feeling right now?
I feel better. That's better.
If we started out at about an 8, how much, if you think about it now, how much charge is still there?
Gosh. Probably about like a 3.
I think that's a miracle. Would you like to take it down farther, or how do you feel? I don't want to press, because we could stop there, or we could do a little bit more. What would you like to do? Because this is your process.
I think I'm okay where it is, and I feel like I am taking up a lot of time.
No,
so
there's.
not
We
bad.
can definitely do a few more if you'd like to take it down farther, or we can stop. I'm just trying not to
Yeah.
press.
I think I'm okay,
Okay.
and I could do this at home.
Yes, of course you could.
Okay.
So, thank you so much. Can you? Does anybody have a question for myself or her? And I'm going to repeat the question.
Is there a specific order, or is it personal to me?
The order, she asked a question, is the order specific? And as I mentioned earlier, there is no specific order. I start where I'm drawn to, just because I love anatomy. And I feel like I can read where it is the most. But that's just me, being Lee. It would have worked just as well as if you started at pericardium. So there is no right order.
However, if mine is mitral valve, would I stay on that longer?
You have a specific problem with your mitral valve?
Cells of the heart. I had 5 heart surgeries.
I would encourage you to not focus just there, because she asked if she's had some heart surgeries, and the question is, should she just focus there? And the truth is that those parts of the heart might need the other parts of the heart to step up a bit more before you can actually talk to them directly. So it could be a series of things. Great question.
So she's down to a 3 now. If later tonight she's back up to a 7 or 8, does she go through this again?
Just go. If the question was, what would happen if she's down now and then she went back up? Then she would just do the process again. What's the chance that she would go up to the same volume? It's 0. Could it go up? Could something else trigger it? Because you see, the thing is that a lot of times heart pain is tied together, so that she had also the passing of her daughter, which we haven't worked with. and they could be connected, so that she might actually, I don't want to program anything, but she could actually have still unresolved feelings about her son that are tied in with her daughter. So this might go up again because there's at least another significant experience in her field that would be important to do this with. Does that make sense? And they can be tied because they can be in the exact same places. In the exact same sense that trauma can store itself in the same part of your nervous system, it can store itself in the same part of your cardiovascular system. So if I had an incredible heartbreaking experience and recorded a lot in my pericardium, then another heartbreaking experience might very well fall there as well. It's just that if there's a weakness energetically or trauma-wise in a certain part of the heart, then that part might store other traumas as well.
Is it important to say all this out loud?
Is it important to say it out loud? Some people, I've worked with one person that had just had dental work and they didn't want to say it out loud because it just hurt. And they didn't want me to do it for them, they just said it to themselves. So it's totally fine to keep this internal. For me, I almost always like the client to say it out loud because I can track the changes in their intonation. You can hear the person down-regulating in the way that they speak. So for me, it's always helpful, but if the person doesn't want to do it or can't do it, it's totally fine. Yes?
I was going to ask you, yes, and thank you for doing this. I did notice you registering her changes.
Yes.
And I wondered two parts in terms of what you do with that information. What do you do with it in terms of how you're helping her, and what do you do with it in yourself?
So the question was, what do I do with the experiences I have of experiencing her process? I don't know if you're asking if I walk home and I'm dealing with it.
No.
That's not what you're asking. No. Okay, so most of all, what's going on for me is that I feel incredibly honored to be here. Not because it's this environment. Whenever I'm doing this process with someone, I feel incredibly honored. And what I actually was most aware of, and I know this sounds totally Lee-ish, but I felt the sun just outpouring unconscionable love to her. Because what's actually going on is that the sun's going, you're magnificent. It's okay to be over this. It's okay. It doesn't validate the person that's passed for you to hold on to this. So the sun, what I literally felt was like the sun just like, and it wasn't the sun radiating that healed her, but it was that dialogue, that connection where the body went, oh, it is okay to let this go. So that's what I was mostly feeling. In the back?
Yes, do you do anything at the end to just kind of close the work once their pain has kind of come down to a 3?
Now, if I'd been in my office, I do a lot of different strategies to integrate this in the nervous system. If I'd been totally spot on, then I should have done the brain gym. I do other processes to integrate neurologically, so I didn't just jump to that here. But what we should do, and we will do before she gets off the stage, is a little bit of brain gym. But other than that, obviously there's a desirable point within, if you're a talk therapist, to leave room to talk about this and what happened and what does this mean. But within the context of my work, people are basically coming in begging to not have the charge anymore. And once the heart charged down, they're just like, it's kind of like there might be a perspective that we need to talk about this now, and there's a level once the charge is down, it's like, I don't really need to talk about it. Does that make sense? So the goal is the resolution. If there's a desire for a dialogue, it's totally appropriate, but at the same time, it's not required to integrate. She just did the integration. She just did it. Other questions?
I have two questions here. One is, I noticed that, I think it was in pericardium, that there was a lot of emotion coming up.
Yes.
And so when a lot of emotion is coming up, I noticed you moved down pretty quickly to the next piece. Would you stay longer because that's trauma got touched, right? So that's my first question. Would you stay longer when there is more emotion?
When the question was, do I tend to stay with a part of the heart when there's a lot of emotion? The answer is that if I'm working in the office and there's a part of the heart where the person has a lot of emotion or starts to stumble, I typically try to hang out there as long as possible because that's where the charge is. Oftentimes the charge is in the most in one of these or two of these. Then you go, oh, it's just so important to know which one. Oh, get over yourself. I can't figure that out. So if you find it, because the person starts stumbling, did you hear the point where she said, when my heart died instead of my son died? That was, again, when people do verbal statements like that, that's not a coincidence. That was an elegant statement that there's a lot here, right? So I'd want to hang out there, for example. Yes, or I might go to something else if I felt like there'd be better, it might be facilitated, some other part of the heart might be more of a resource.
And so the second part of this question, is there a place where you would stop if you feel like there is like too much? Where is the point where you would feel it's not safe?
If the person floods, that's obviously what I was talking about, where you want to pull them out. If the person is totally flooded, it means the process is broken down. They didn't do anything wrong. It means that this process in this moment or at that moment wasn't working. And the question is, what do we need to do different? Because getting flooded isn't helpful. The trauma background that I come from would say that getting regularly flooded and overwhelmed in session means that I could be, in fact, re-traumatizing the client. So my goal is to have this process be as safe as possible and to have that happen as few times as possible. If that really happened in the office once or even if it happened twice, I would switch strategy. Does that make sense? If I keep on going back to the strategy and she keeps on flooding, that means that this strategy sucks. It's not helping. Does that mean she's stuck? No, it means I should do something else. It means I should do something else. Lots of other techniques are available. But this strategy for that trauma might not be working. Yes?
Are you feeling that energy field of her heart? Are you monitoring that field of where it is that you talked about that circles back around?
So the question that she asked is, am I feeling her field as it circles back around? One of the things that I consciously did when she was nice enough to come up and do this process is I did it as vanilla as possible. Because I didn't want you to think that this works because of Lee's weird, Because what would I truly do if she was in my office? I'd walk around her field and feel where it was broken. I would. I'd do that before I started. I'd walk right around her and I'd go, and I wouldn't necessarily tell her, I'd feel the brakes, and then we start to do the process. We wouldn't stop until the brakes were gone. But that's, me being, that's me being Lee, which is, just ask my wife, it's really weird. That's kind of like a way that I have a lot of fun because it uses my gifts, but it's not required at all in this process. Can I walk around someone and feel their field? Yes, but I'm good at that. But it was absolutely unnecessary for this to work. I didn't read her at all. I consciously was like going, part of my body was like going, where's the brakes? Where's the brakes? I go, just shut up and do the process because it works. And it did. How cool is that? No Lee magic.
If she wanted to do another trauma, then she could do the list again, but she would not need to do the list again for that particular trauma?
We'd only go back to this trauma if after, for example, to me, if this was a longer experience and she was open to it, then it might be too much in one session, but I'd go, and would you like to work on the passing of your daughter? And if we did that and that came down, I might go, and what happened? If, this is a lot, but if she was, sometimes people come to me from out of town and they're like going, we got to do everything now. If she was available, I'd go, and if you think about your son, is there still anything left there? And if she was, then we go back to it. But I probably would not have, we might have been able to get this down to a 2 or something. But to take it down farther would have been really hard with this other pain that she has. It's not that simple because everything's tied together. So just one more question before we actually do this with each other.
You can touch briefly on the physical trauma to the heart as well as emotional trauma. How do you track that when you're working with someone who has both emotional trauma and has had physical trauma?
Can you give me an example? I get it, but I don't want to project my understanding.
Somebody who's had a death
Okay.
and has also had heart surgery.
Yes, okay. So if someone's had heart surgery and has had a death, then to me, one of the things that's most confusing when someone comes to me is when I'm talking with them on the phone and I ask them, I'd like you to do a list before you come in of any significant physical traumas you've experienced, any concussions, any surgeries, any bone breaks. Now, a lot of times people go, but I don't want help with that. That's not what I want help with. I want help with my daughter passing. And the truth is that one of the things that could be hanging up her resolution of her daughter's passing was the surgery. Surgeries, again, my metabolism is so messed up from my mother being an alcoholic in utero that I've had kidney stones 13 times. There's nothing I can do about it. It's just, I'm seeing a great doctor in town, and I've had 5 lithotripsies. And they've saved my life. One of them I for sure would have died. And every one of those was a trauma. I would just love it if you guys would leave here and know that physical traumas are just important in the person's landscape as the psychological ones. The psychological ones might have a lot of charge, but it's just like the number of times where a concussion is the biggest deal in someone's ability to resolve everything, because the concussion could be holding on to everything. So after my concussion, after my heart surgery, most definitely would be an appropriate thing to do. Great question. So when I do this in the office, a lot of times I use other strategies, as I said, but when I do this in the office, I just say, just stand next to me and just try to do this. If it feels too painful to stretch in this way, just think about doing it. So walk like this, reach towards your right knee with your left hand, and then the opposite. And then you just walk in place for a while. This is called cross crawl. Now what's interesting about this is it integrates the left and right sides of the brain. And you're trying to actually allow the brain to catch up with what the heart just did. You're trying to get the brain to catch up with what the heart just did, because the heart's just done this transmutation of trauma. You're trying to leave space for the brain to grok it. Doing great. Very good. Okay, let's do the other one. The other one, you clasp one hand and the other behind you. And you're just going to draw an 8 with your hips going forward and then back behind you. Doing great. Forward and back behind you. Don't do it any more than it would hurt. It would make it hurt. Great job. Okay, and then stop and then go in the other direction. Now, the reason for this exercise versus the cross crawl is that this, if you look at it, it's more of a front-back movement of the nervous system. The cross crawl is most specifically left-right, and this is front-back. Just trying to get a different part of the nervous system here. This can help someone leave and be more in their body to drive. Very good. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
I did want to mention something about nausea. There are other, obviously if someone has nausea all the time, you'd want to see a doctor, all right? And there are some times where there's no medical explanation. If there are other causes for nausea other than this heart thing we talked about, some people, there's lots of reflexes in the body. Some people unfortunately have the vomit reflex turned on all the time. So if you have nausea all the time and there's no medical basis for it, you've talked to your doctor, you might want to give me a call. The vomit reflex can be turned off, and oftentimes it's life-changing. Just mentioning that. Not trying to build up my practice. It's just such a terrible way to suffer. I've had some women in my practice that got nauseous after being raped, and then they got nauseous during the act of being raped, and then thereafter they were always nauseous during sex because the vomit reflex got turned on. So there are other factors other than, I don't want to be simplifying and saying that this is everything. So how about questions or comments on what we just did? Anybody? Yes?
So I worked on something really old. It wasn't a huge big deal, just a practice.
Yes.
And the more I practiced, then the more activated I became. And it was like everybody else in there was going, oh, I want some help. Oh, I want some help too.
That's what he said was that he started to work on something that he thought that didn't have much charge, and he got in there and he went, oh, there's a lot more charge. That to me is called totally normal. Because this is addressing a way that your body is in pain that to a certain extent up till now you haven't had a tool to address. So what would be the most logical thing to do would be to think that it's not there. Now, I'm not being critical, I'm just saying I think that's what we all do. It's just like I've gone into certain things for myself, because part of this is also a Buddhist practice. And a Buddhist practice means that you're allowing the emotion to happen, and then the emotion goes, I'm bigger than you thought. And that's totally normal, because you're actually in allowing it versus like going, I don't feel this, I love everyone, life is positive. So to me, that's very normal. And this can bring, that's why I said that line in the talk earlier where I said, you might, as the practitioner, want to jot things down that the person remembers, because a lot of stuff can come up. That's totally normal. Yes?
So in a case where there's multiple occurrences of a similar trauma,
Yes.
would you want to do them all as a blanket or take them one at a time? And I'm thinking of two examples. So I've been in 5 car accidents in my life, and I did car accidents, plural. But I'm thinking of in case of a client that was repeatedly physically abused, would you want to do the whole history of it or just the most recent?
Okay, so her question was a really good one. What happens when something's happened multiple times, like multiple car accidents, multiple situations of physical abuse? It's often helpful, if you can, to group them. After my brother beat me. After each time my brother beat me. But then what that often does is it takes the charge down to a certain extent, and you might go, were there any times that really was the worst? Were there any really poignant times where you felt like your heart most broke by how your brother treated you? Then I'd go for that. Does this make sense? So again, it's helpful if you can to do a general approach, but if it doesn't get it down long enough, far enough, then oftentimes there's 1 or 2 sitting in there that are just have so much charge that they have to be dealt with individually.
I did something that happened almost 50 years ago, and I didn't think it was going to have much charge, but of course it did. And what I noticed when I went through the list, 2 of them were very difficult, very emotional, which is the pericardium and the one right next to it.
Yes.
And I realized that that is the way that other traumas have come in, is through those 2 areas.
Yes.
Because they're the parts that are most broken.
So what she said is that she was going through the list and she noticed that 2 parts had a lot of charge. And that's exactly what happens in my office time and time again. There's oftentimes the person's going through the list and then they start saying this one word, and it's just like you can just feel the whole room feel with this emotional release, because that's where the charge is. So each one of us stores things in a particular place, oftentimes. And sometimes we have this trauma in this part and this trauma in this part. And for many people, there's a certain place where, yeah, I like to store a lot of things there. It's my favorite place. No one knows it exists. Other questions? Yes. So her question was that she found that she was almost getting exhausted during the process and almost like wanting to fall asleep. If I'm just guessing, obviously, I'm just totally guessing. To me, what it might mean the most is that there's some one or two traumas that are really important that probably have to be dealt with, because otherwise you go, okay, I'm going to work on this minor one because this is a class exercise and Lee told me to and I'm trying to be good. And then your heart just goes, I really don't give a damn about that trauma. There's this one. And you start to do the other ones and your body goes, I'm so bored. That's a possibility. That's my best guess. But if that doesn't apply, call me.
Question I wasn't going to ask. But my other questions were, you also said trauma gets stored in different parts of the nervous system as well. And does this process address that or not so much?
This process addressed trauma being stored in particular parts of the heart. And when a problem is really based in the nervous system, what will this process do? Anybody guess? Nothing. That's the reason behind my work is like, so where is it for the person? Because this is a great process for heart-based trauma, but I'm not presenting it all as a process. It's like to try this process and the vomit reflex would do nothing, because it's a different approach. It's a different part of the body.
I was wondering, when I was doing mine, I could feel certain, the endocrine piece in particular was where the charge was.
Yes.
And I felt like I needed to go back to it, which I did.
Yes.
And I did it until I felt the charge going down.
Yes.
And that felt really good. And there was one other that I went back to. So when you do this with clients in your office, do you ask them if there are any they want to go back to?
That would be totally appropriate. If I didn't feel like I was tracking it myself, the question was, would you ever have it be appropriate in your office to go to the client and say, did any of those parts of your heart feel particularly charged? That's a great question. I totally recommend it. That's a great question, because I rely on my own reading, and that's much better as the person's own experience. Great. I think I should get to the summary here. If you have a question, I'm happy to be available after, but there's a couple things I want to talk about. There's two other strategies that apply to heartbreak that really would work well for body workers, and I wanted to make sure that I brought it up. I'm not going to do it on someone, but I want to show it. Can someone come up on the stage? Thank you. So, and you can just actually face this way. So there's an aspect of the meridian system, again, this is for body workers, that's called the divergent meridians. This is a really good book on it. The divergent meridians, there's 12 meridians. There's a divergent lung, a divergent heart, divergent spleen. And you go, what's the big deal? The divergent meridians embrace the heart. 10 of the 12 divergent meridians go through the heart and hold it together. It's an incredible way of addressing heartbreak. Now, if you were to read this book, when you read it, it'll say all these really technical acupuncture approaches for working with divergent meridians. I have no question about them, and they're eminently not interesting to me because I'm not an acupuncturist. So what would I do then? Can I touch you? So, for example, there's like the kidney divergent. What the kidney divergent does is it goes through the kidney and connects to the heart. I just put my hand in these two places and say hello to the meridian. Hi left divergent kidney meridian. I just keep saying hi to it. And eventually it goes, oh yeah, thank you for reminding me. Then what do? I go over to the other one And then I say hello to the right kidney divergent meridian. What does the spleen meridian do? It goes to the spleen and connects the spleen to the heart. What does the liver divergent do? It connects the liver to the heart. It's a profound way for dealing with heartache. It's profound for dealing with heartache. Thank you so much. There's also lymphatic work, and I'm not talking about lymphatic work as it's typically done by lymphatic practitioners, which is a really great strategy in and of itself. I have no problem with it. In this kind of work, there's two lymphatic systems which are part of the heart circulatory system. And what happens in trauma is they get disconnected from the heart energetically. They don't get physically disconnected, otherwise you'd blow up like a balloon. But they get energetically disconnected. So this is a person's front here. But let's just say they were turned around. And what I do is I just basically put my hand on the major channel of this system, and I say, hey, right lymphatic duct system, check out your relationship with the heart. And I just keep repeating that. And eventually it goes, oh yeah, I'm supposed to connect with the heart. And boom, the person feels better. Then I go over to this one. I do the same thing. So those are simplistic descriptions, but the lymphatic systems oftentimes in heartbreak are disconnected from the heart. A very powerful way of working with heartbreak. So, the heart has a distinct role in our lives, a distinct understanding of our lives. And that understanding is expressed through the field that it generates. The heart's experience, relationship to our lives is expressed through the field it generates. Trauma can diminish that field. It can shrink it, it can disassociate it, it can break it into pieces, it can make it more porous. This leads to cycling feelings of pain and isolation. This process is about using your brain to focus your heart on that field. That's all it is. You're just using your brain to go through a mechanical process to talk to your heart to say, check out the field you're generating. This can actually reboot your heart and recreate a sense of safety in the world. This can actually help your heart and brain become friends again. This can help you feel cared for. This can help you stay with your feeling instead of feeling blown away by what everyone else is feeling all the time. This can help you feel supported again. It can actually help you feel grace. Thank you so much, everybody.